Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this edition of On the Range, and today I'm up in the MiG-21 to demonstrate dive bombing using general purpose bombs and using the automatic function of the gun sight. So what I'm going to do is allow the gun sight to project a reticule on the ground that's going to tell me where the aircraft is predicting the bombs will impact if I release at that moment. So it should just be a simple matter of flying the aircraft to a target, diving on the target, placing the reticle over the target, releasing the weapons, and going away. But I think you'll find that in practice that's a little bit more involved, but we'll get into that as this video and this series actually progresses. So let me begin by getting the cockpit set up in the right configuration for a bomb's release in the mode that I have in mind. And I think you'll find that there is a lot of manual switch throwing that goes into setting up for any kind of release in the MiG-21, and that finding your own system and doing it the same way every time is going to alleviate a lot of frustration and help you eliminate mistakes when it comes to the switch settings. Now I'll start out with a technique that I use, and I'll start by getting the switches configured that I would normally do pretty soon after takeoff. I'm already over the target at this point, but I would start by coming down here to the right console, and for this release the only ones that I need are the missile rocket launch switch to the on position, pylon 1 and 2 power, pylon 3 and 4 power, and the gun sight. That's going to apply power to the pylons and allow me to arm and release the weapons. And it's also going to get the gun sight warming up. And I would do that pretty much immediately after takeoff. I'll also go ahead and verify that my radar is in the standby position. I'll wait until I'm ready to employ weapons before I turn this on, so that I don't waste any of the coolant liquid and I run out of radar time, because I'm going to need the radar for some ranging information when I'm in the dive. Now when I'm over the target, or at least relatively close to the target, and want to think about getting set up for a specific delivery, now what I would want to do is start from the left and work my way around. So I'll start over here on the left side of my console, then go to the gun sight, then go down to the center pedestal, and kind of do it in that order, just kind of flowing left to right as I do it. And that just helps me keep track of where I'm at and keep track of what switches I've gotten to already. So I'll begin by going to the ground master mode. I'm going to leave my missile mode in the neutral center position, and then I'm going to, on this selector, select the weapon stations that I want to release these bombs from. Now on the MiG-21 we have 4 weapon stations, numbered 1 through 4, and they're numbered 1 and 2 for the inboard station and 3 and 4 for the outboard station. And I'll come to an external view to show you what we have here, and these are 250 kilogram general purpose bombs, similar to like a Mark 82 that you would see on a Western aircraft. But yeah, station 1 and 2 are the inboards, station 3 or 4 are the outboards, and you always want to release the outboard stations first, so that you're giving yourself an advantage when it comes to aircraft handling and not putting too much stress on that outboard, on the wing, by having so much weight out there on the outboard stations. So release station 3 and 4 first, and then station 1 and 2. And no matter what you do, the bombs are going to always release simultaneously from these stations. There's no single release capability in the MiG-21, because just due to the design of the aircraft, you don't really want to put yourself into an asymmetric load if you can at all help it. So both bombs are going to come up at the same time, and with this selector set to the 3-4 position, the outboard station 3 and 4 are going to release. So continuing on with the gun sight, now I have 3 switches on the left side of the sight. The top switch I want in the down position, that's going to be the launch position. The center switch I want in the down position, that's the bombardment position. And the bottom switch I want to leave in the auto position, just like it's configured right now, since I am going to want the gun sight to calculate automatically a position for the reticule. Now I have a missile gyro switch that I'm going to leave in the top missile position. And then I need to get my reticule and fixed mesh displayed. So I'll begin by flipping my reticule switch on. And you can see that right now it's not displayed. It's actually there, it's just below the field of view of the gun sight. And I'll demonstrate that real quick by going back up to the shooting position. Yeah, you can see the reticule, but when I go to the bombardment position, it's outside the field of view, meaning that it's calculating an impact point that's below what I can see in the gun sight. And that's going to be very important once we get into the delivery here in just a second. But I'm also going to, and this is just my technique, turn on the fixed mesh, and this is like my backup standby reticule. And I'm going to use this to give myself an alignment guide. So I'm going to be using specifically this vertical line in the middle to act as kind of a bomb fall line. So I'm going to align the target with this line and use it to gauge its position, relative to my reticule as I'm on the run. Okay, so at that point, I have one more, and it's just another technique thing that I do. I have this target size selector dial that I can use to, in this mode, to adjust the size of the reticule. And you can see at the default setting that the reticule is not visible. I'm going to put it all the way up to the highest setting, just so that I can barely see the reticule visible there in the very bottom of the sight glass. So I'll be able to tell when it starts to move up a little bit quicker than I normally or otherwise would when I'm on the dive. Okay, now, coming down, continuing to work my way around, I'm going to verify that I have the pylon 1 and 2, 3, and 4 lights on. That's going to tell me that there are bombs on those stations. I'm going to put my tactical drop switch to the up arm position and verify I have a light on. That's going to allow the fuse to arm. I could release the bombs without doing that, but the fuses would not arm and the bomb therefore would not detonate once it impacts. Last, I'm going to release the cover on my weapons release switch. And now all I have to do is press and hold the weapons release switch and the bombs will release. Okay, so I've got the targets in sight, and now I'm ready to roll in and see if I can make something work on this pass. And I want to wait on this part until I'm ready to roll in. So I'm going to go radar on, and I'm going to go to the fixed beam position on the radar. And you don't have to do that, but it's going to put the radar into a sort of a preferred configuration. And it's going to allow ranging information to be displayed down here on this bottom scale. So I have the scale running from 0.4 kilometers to 2 kilometers. And once I'm within 2 kilometers, I'll be able to judge my slant range to the target by looking at this bottom scale right here and looking at the position of this indicator dial, or indicator pointer. So that's a very, very involved procedure. There's a lot to learn there and a lot of stuff to miss there. So that's, again, I just do it the same way every time, starting with the switches that I get down here at the beginning, then working my way around left to right and then down as I go. And now that we have everything set up in the aircraft, we can start to think about the technique that we need to use to effectively dive bomb using this automatic mode. Now, one huge consideration to take into account is going to be the minimum altitude at which we release the bomb. And there are two factors that come into play here. One is the fragmentation pattern of the bomb. We want to make sure that when we pull out of this dive that we're going to be no closer to the bomb impact point than 700 meters. That means that we have to start pulling out of the dive at a very, very high altitude. 700 meters is about 2,300 feet. We want to be no lower than that and no closer to that, when the bomb impacts. So releasing from anywhere from probably about 2,000 meters is what I'm going to release at, and then aggressively pull out of that dive, and that's the absolute minimum that I can do, and that's just taking into account the fragmentation pattern of the bomb. The second consideration is going to be the dive angle that we come in from. Now, I mentioned earlier that the reticule is telling us where the bomb is going to impact is going to be way, way outside the field of view of the sight glass. Now, I'll demonstrate what's going to happen real quick. I'll just dive on this, just a random place out here from a low dive angle. I'll go for about 20 degrees on this dive, which I can gauge using this instrument right here, 20 degrees. Now, you see that as I'm in the dive, that the reticule is not going to come up into the sight glass until I get to a very, very low altitude. Now, I have to keep in mind that 700 meter minimum altitude just for the fragmentation pattern, which I just busted right there. And then also, if I'm in a higher dive angle, okay, now it's starting to come up, and now it's finally in the sight glass. So, I was down to, I was down to like 100 meters before I could even pull out of that dive, and that would have been the best case at that dive angle. So that's telling me right there that to release from a high enough altitude that I'm going to be able to pull out of the dive before getting to the bomb's fragmentation pattern and pull out of the dive before I impact the ground, it's kind of counterintuitive, but I have to do it from a higher dive angle and from a much higher altitude. So that's why I'm going to, before doing a dive bomb delivery in the MiG-21, climb to an altitude of at least about 3,000 to 4,000 meters, or about 10 to 15,000 feet. So let me go ahead and do that real quick, and then I'll go ahead and demonstrate a dive bomb pass, a couple of passes in the MiG-21. Okay, so I've climbed up to an altitude of about 5,000 meters, which is, what is that, 15, 16,000 feet. But it's high enough that it's going to allow me to get into a steep dive, release the bomb, and then pull out, hopefully before that 700-foot hard deck that I have imposed with this type of bomb. So what I like to do for technique is not start with the target area out in front of me. Obviously, if I was flying directly at the target, I wouldn't be able to see it, and chances are if I'm flying at something with the intention to bomb it, it's probably going to start shooting back at some point. So I come in offset and keep the target in sight. I want to gauge this when I'm in about a 50 to 60 degree dive. I want a really steep dive in this, just so that helps get that reticule into the gun sight quicker. I want to do it from a relatively high airspeed. I'm about 600 kph. I want that's about good enough, and I'll dive on this one. I'll do the smaller bombing circle out there. Okay, so I'll try to describe this on the way down what I'm doing, but okay, I'm going to come around, gauge this for about a 50 degree dive. So a little bit further. Well, this is steeper than I'm used to, but okay, about there. Okay, I'm going to pull the throttle to idle, roll in on the target. I want my aim off point to be set up so that I'm going to be flying the aircraft forward of the target and just letting the target just sort of stabilize there in the bottom third or bottom 2/3 of the gun sight. Okay, here comes the reticule. Release once they coincide, and then pull aggressively for the horizon. No more than 5 Gs, because I don't want things to start flying off the aircraft, and 5 Gs is where that starts to happen. And okay, I pulled out of that dive at about 800 meters, and there's no way in the MiG-21 to actually see where your bombs impact, especially when pulling that aggressively. There's just no way, so I'll have to come up with some way to do a BDA on that, maybe an external view or TAC view or something. But I mean, that's a basic dive bombing pass. Now, things that you saw happen there, now you see that my reticule is back up to the center position in the gun sight, and I'll fix that here in a second. But okay, if I come back down to my lights, you can see that my pylon 3 and 4 lights did go out, which means that the bombs were released from station 3 and 4, my outboard stations, which I can barely see out there. And now, what I have to do to release the other 2 bombs on Station 1 and 2 is manually select Station 1 and 2. And now you can see that the reticule on the gun sight goes back down to the position outside of the field of view of the gun sight glass, which is where I want it to be for the beginning of this release. Okay, so now I'm set up for one more pass. I've got myself offset from the target, like I like to do for my technique at least. And I'm just going to gauge this for about a 50 to 60 degree dive. I'll pay a little bit more attention to my dive angle and see if that actually matches what I'm diving at this time around. Okay, I've got Station 1 and 2 selected. And yeah, just a quick check to make sure everything is still configured. It is. Okay, so I'm going to bomb the smaller bombing circle this time again. Okay, entry airspeed, about 500 kph, a little bit slower than I would like again, but it's okay. Okay, let me roll in. Throttle to idle. This might be a little bit shallow. Let me see how this looks. Okay, set my aim off point so that I'm overflying the target. Roll out. Okay, 50 degrees. That's about right. And I'm just going to correct back to the right and keep it right there, down towards the bottom of the gun sight. Wait for that reticule to start coming up. Release. Pull aggressively. I can be a little bit more aggressive this time. And boy, I got way, way lower than I wanted to on that one, and it was because of the lower airspeed, and it was because I just need to go for that 60 degree dive angle. I didn't even make an attempt at a BDA on that one, but it should have been fairly close. But, you know, like I mentioned before, you know, you want 700 meters, I think I might have said feet before, 700 meters is the lowest point that you want to be on the pullout. I mean, it's important not only for avoiding terrain, but also for avoiding the fragmentation off the weapons. Even though it isn't really modeled in DCS or any flight simulator that I can think of, but it is a consideration to keep in mind that, you know, I'm guilty of it myself, but probably most of the deliveries that people make in general are a little bit too low for fragmentation, but you'll survive in either case if you're just in it for the enjoyment like I am. So folks, that's a basic look at dive bombing in the automatic mode in the MiG-21. And that's just my technique. You know, there's no right or wrong way to do this. That's just what works for me within the confines of how things are, how things can work in the MiG-21, trying to fly it, realistically when it comes to that, especially that pull-out altitude. But that's one way of doing it. So there's a lot more weapons deployment to come. I also have a manual technique that I can use. It's very, very similar to that, which we'll see coming up later. Also air-to-air and air-to-ground with the rockets and a whole lot of other stuff. So, hey, thanks again for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time.